So this video I want to do a little bit differently. Instead of talking you through all the steps of the makeup, I want to take some time and talk about the sin itself. This week's video, still sponsored by Deadly Sins Cosmetics, is focusing on the sin sloth. Historically, sloth has been one of the most unusual sins. Theologians and philosophers have debated for centuries on whether it is the most dangerous sin or one of the most innocent. And even the definition around what sloth is sort of unclear. I think for the general population, they understand sloth to be laziness, but it's so much more encompassing than that. All of the Deadly Sins Cosmetics matte liquid lip shades draw from the Latin root words for each of the sins. So let's look at what that is for sloth. Acedia, which really means without care, which really is less laziness and more apathy, the inability to care about oneself or others. And the cardinal sins were pared down from a longer list into the 7 that we know today, and sloth sort of encompassed melancholia or despair, which was this feeling of great sadness. The Eastern Orthodox Church actually uses a word that doesn't mean sloth, but dejection, which seems to aim more at those roots. Now, modern philosophers have sort of let the word acedia fall by the wayside. It's not commonly used anymore. But mental health experts have taken a look at the definition of sloth and how it was described over time. A lack of care, excessive tiredness, a great sadness, a lack of deep emotional feeling, inability to leave one's bed, and all of these things reframed through our modern understanding sound much more like depression. And it makes sense that scholars in historic times might have seen people afflicted with depression and thought that they were lackadaisical. To be honest, when I was going through school, there was such a limited discussion on mental health that it was hard to really fathom what depression was, what it looked like, how it felt. I didn't really understand what that looked like until I had some close friends explain their battles. I was watching as over the months they retreated into themselves. They would have trouble getting out of bed, they would be tired, they would cancel plans, and selfishly I didn't understand why. Over time I tried to inform myself more, to ask questions, and to find out how I could be the best support for someone fighting this disease. And it wasn't until I had to face it myself that I really knew what that demon looked like. I've always been someone who is upbeat and positive and social, and to watch that slowly start to fade away, I felt like such a shell of my former self. And it doesn't happen all at once. It's not just like a triggering event. It creeps up on you. And I remember looking in the mirror one day, and I think that was the day that I figured out that this is what depression looked like. And I stared at myself, and I just remember being so unhappy with what I was looking at. I didn't recognize the person I was seeing. The person looking back at me was sad, was angry, was not good enough for anybody else. When your mind has gone to such a dark place, it's easier to be asleep than it is to be awake. The weight of the blankets and the lights off feels safer somehow. And when you're asleep, your brain doesn't tell you how terrible you are. But laying in bed, it seems like it's giving up or being lazy. But I think what people might not understand is every minute feels like a fight. It feels like you're running a marathon just to pick yourself up and take yourself out of the house. To respond to a text or reach out to a friend and, God forbid, ask for help. It's energy that you don't feel like you have. I used to describe what I was feeling as I was treading water, and everything around me was just dark ocean. I desperately wanted to get to shore somehow. I was just exhausted from trying to stay above water, and it was all I could do to stay afloat. I really had no direction. I didn't know which way I needed to swim, so I just stayed there and was worried that one day I would just drown. And it took so much just to stay there. It's scary for me to think about, even though it's been years at this point, because I could see myself, and it was like I was watching somebody else. And I could yell and scream and try and wake myself up and say, snap out of it, and you're good enough. But you don't hear it. You can't hear it. And that's why you feel like you might drown. You're just gasping for air, and each breath feels like it's just taking so much out of you. To anybody who has or is battling this demon that is depression, it is a war. And every day is a battle, and I see you and I hear you. And I want you to win. And I hope you know that you can fight for yourself, because fighting for your happiness, it's the most important thing you'll ever do.